So tonight, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Glenn Allen is joining us to talk a little bit about self-employment. Glenn is always a great member of the community because in the couple different community events that I go to, Glenn is a amazing has an amazing attendance record. He pops up all over the place, and love that about him. So, Glenn has talked to our students a couple times, and he is going to focus in on freelancing and a little bit about self-employment and that side of things. So I will hand it over to Glenn, and off we go.
Yeah. Hey, Max. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's good. Yeah. I usually speak at every cohort just to share my insights from being a freelancer. Um, just because, yeah, I've been freelancing like 15 years and I really love it. It fits my personality. It's hard to imagine being a full-time worker, but never say never. You guys, everyone hears me and you can see my screen. Awesome. All right, here we go. I've done this talk a few times, and so I'm just gonna reusing these slides. So this initially we'll talk about my origin story, how I got into computing. So in I think it was sixth grade, I went to a field trip at an IBM facility. This is in the Hudson Valley. This is in the 80s, and IBM was king at that time. I mean, just um, and the tour was amazing. The field trip was amazing. The buildings were huge. There were discs the size of like semi truck tires and laser printers, and I'm seeing all this stuff that was so cool. The guy, the person doing the talk was a gentleman who started in the mailroom, and he worked his way up to be a manager. He's wearing a three-piece suit and everything and a tie. So just very impressive, made an impression on me. And from that point on, I knew I wanted to work in software, computer science, to be a technical person. So that made my life easy. No one wants to, everyone's wondering, what should I do? What do I do? I don't know. I didn't declare a major yet. I mean, I was computer science from day one. So that made things easy. Um, so yeah, went to, got my uh, associate's degree at Dutchess Community College, bachelor's at SUNY Poly in the Utica area. And then I did work part-time for forever, well, maybe about 10 years. I got two masters at SU working part-time. That was kind of a long haul, but I got it. Um, and part of the motivation when I first started out, I wanted to be a manager. I wanted to be a CIO. That seemed to be what the common wisdom was back then. You want to be, you want to get promoted. You're chasing that brass ring. You want to be the best you can be. Be a corporate guy, whatever. So I drank the Kool-Aid very much, and that's part of why I went for that engineering management degree. Uh, but as my career progressed, I sort of lost a little faith in the system. Um, so this is supposed to be a little animation that doesn't work. But anyway, the title really nails it, Loss of Innocence. So, I've had this attitude about being a go-getter for many years, and I was on a very big project. Um, my specialty is SAP software, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but SAP is huge. It's the third largest software company in the world behind Microsoft and Oracle, and there are many, thousands of businesses that run their operations using SAP software. So I was working for a local mid-sized manufacturing company in their IT department as a developer, and yeah, this SAP project is massive. So everyone's working lots of overtime. Uh, we're not really ready for this kind of thing. Matter of fact, it took us like two go arounds before we went live successfully. And anyway, there was a couple different groups. I would say there's maybe three groups of employees. The A group were people that were just working around the clock. I mean, they were doing probably 80-hour weeks every week. I was in the B group where wasn't quite doing as much as the A group, but I was logging some decent overtime. I had a couple late nights, working until 2 in the morning kind of thing, weekends. And, the boss calling me, I'm out trying to play volleyball and I'm getting called. And then there was a C group that just, they worked their 8 to 5 and that was it. So I heard rumors that the people in the A group had bonus deals. So, if you stay with the company a month after go live, you're going to get a 10% of salary bonus. And I'm like, wow, that's wouldn't be too, I mean, it sucks working all this much, but that's a little chunk of money. So I figured, well, I'm not going to get the A group deal, but they'll give us something, I'll get maybe a 5% of salary, something like that. There was just a couple of people in the B group. So, at the kickoff, when all this stuff was disclosed, the people in the B group, we got $100 bonus. And it just tore my heart out. I just couldn't believe it. But it was a good lesson. If I could do it over again, I would have, gone up to the boss and said, hey, I heard about these deals. I want a deal. Just assuming, right? I took the wimpy way out too, right? I was just assuming they would do the right thing. But you can't assume that. If there's something that you want, you have to go after it. But that whole experience just turned me off completely. We had consultants working on the project, and they were getting paid up front. They were getting paid lucratively right away. So I'm like, I realized that's the path I want to pursue. This trying to be the CIO is ridiculous. Anything could go wrong. You could work your butt off for a company, and then the boss 10 levels up makes a bad move and they got to lay people off, right? Or I don't know, your boss moves on to another company and now that goodwill that you built up has diminished a little bit, right? So that whole arrangement just didn't work anymore. All right, let me move on. All right, so that's how I got involved in consulting and freelancing, being self-employed. The business aspects, I'm not going to get too much into this. I'm just going to be more about like my anecdotal experience. To be self-employed, there's a bunch of different legal entities that you could be. You can have a DBA, doing business as. You could be a sole proprietor. I decided on this limited liability corporation, an LLC. You get like the name implies, you get some liability protection. You don't, if you get sued for some reason, you don't get sued, the company gets sued. And the taxation was better as an LLC. So that's why I went with an LLC. And most people that are self-employed go the LLC route, in New York at least. So one of the things you can have when you're a business is deductions, right? So that's a plus. Like my computer is a write-off, my phone bill, internet bill. There's certain parts of the house I can write off. Business vehicle. So that's nice. I mean, most people are paying for their vehicle out of their own pocket. I have Uncle Sam helping me because I'm able to, over so many years, write off a certain amount depreciation. And I have a little note here about don't get too crazy because you don't want to get the IRS interested in you. There's rumors of people that try to write off a boat, like, oh, I'm entertaining clients. I can write off a boat. It's a big red flag. You probably get audited, and then like every little thing that you did, you might get busted on, So, and then yes, get a good accountant. I know a lot of people, they try to do their own taxes, and it's possible, but this falls under the category of delegating. You want to concentrate on your core strengths. I don't want to deal, I don't want to be knowledgeable on all the accounting rules. I'll pay, so they're expensive. I'll pay a good amount of money, but these folks make sure that the numbers are right. I'm not doing anything crazy. and they keep me out of trouble. And that's definitely worth the price of a good accountant. Um, okay. So yes, great aspects of freelancing. So there's this notion of freedom. I know a lot of people out there that they hate their jobs. They're kind of stuck. I mean, they're making good money. It's like they can't leave it. You know what I mean? They hate it, but they can't leave because, you know, that's called the rat race, right? You know, you have a family, you have obligations, you need that money, and to start over is pretty tricky. I think you folks can probably identify with that because you are in a like a rebuilding mode. So you know what I'm talking about. You're not super satisfied with what you're currently doing, and you want to get into a better field, a better industry. So for me, the freedom is, yeah, if I'm not happy with a current client, I'll just leave, you know, find another project. I'm not married to a company, you know, my retirement is not vested in this company. I'm not committed. I can just work with other customers, other clients. And typically what I do is I do contracting. So I might have a contract for 6 months, a year, 3 months, whatever, 2 years. And if I'm really not happy, I just won't renew. I'll find another project. So that's what I mean by freedom. You still have obligations to meet. You still have to please, you know, instead of pleasing a boss, you're pleasing a customer, right? So same thing, but it's a little different. Okay. So continuing on with great aspects, typically you get paid well. Typically, as a contractor, consultant, you're supposed to get, the rule of thumb is like double what an employee would get. So if the prevailing wage is like $40 an hour as an employee, then you should get about 80 about as a consultant, as a freelancer. And I have this first one, I have a little picture of a tweet that I was on this crazy project in 2016 where I was working around the clock. I would not really want to do this again. And this is not a brag really, but I mean, I literally worked like 80, 100 hour weeks for a couple of weeks. There was at least 2 swing shifts where I was literally working almost 24 hours, like almost, you know, like, you know, start work at 8 a.m. and then go all the way to 5 a.m. the next day and then go home for a couple, you know, go to the hotel for a couple hours. So I made that was the biggest check I've ever had, that little deposit, the biggest one. But I mean, I killed myself. But my first year as a professional software developer was less than that. My first year of working was less money than that deposit. So the number was cool. Anyway, so for my field, I ended up doing a lot of travel with SAP. So with SAP projects, and that's kind of nice. I like travel. I like getting out of town. Was able to go to, you know, I spent time in Detroit and Indianapolis, New York, Long Island, where Florida, of course. Although Florida I didn't really enjoy that much. So to me, and then wherever I go on these projects, I'll try to do a little sightseeing. Like for example, in Detroit, I went to I got to see a football game. I went to the Motown Museum. Pretty cool stuff. Stuff I wouldn't have gone really on my own, but because I was there, I checked it out and it was interesting. Perks. Let me see. Some perks might be one of the companies I worked for. They were into lenses. What was it called? I can't think of the name of the company, but they worked with like designer frames and they worked in the vision industry. And once or twice a year, they would do a sale of their designer frames at cost, basically dirt cheap. And the time I was there, they allowed consultants, non-employees, to participate. So I bought a bunch. I bought like a couple of Salvatore Ferragamo frames, Nine West, Nike, all these really cool, cool frames at much less the cost, much less than retail. So that doesn't happen all the time, but that was kind of cool. Example of a perk. Plus, yeah, with going back to travel and a perk, you earn the miles, you earn the points, you get hotel points. I have like 2 million Marriott points, so anytime I go anywhere on vacation, I basically have a free hotel room. That's kind of nice. Although when you're traveling for a living, you kind of don't want to travel on your vacation. You kind of like to chill. Um, and look, and lastly, I'll say, typically you're working with the best. You're working with other consultants from all around, and it's a great way to learn. You learn from other folks because they are accomplished developers. Okay. All right. Crappy aspects of freelancing. Again, this is like my anecdotal experience. Yeah, if you are traveling and you're away from home and you're with somebody, you have a partner, you need someone who's kind of strong. They can't be calling you every hour because of a problem with the kids or something else. They have to be able to handle things. If it's an emergency, of course, you got to, that can happen. But just regular day-to-day things, you have to have a good partner. It's hard to maintain relationships. Um, for me, the travel schedule is usually either you fly out like a late Sunday night flight or an early Monday morning flight and come back on Thursday, or it could be a drive. Depending, if it's 3 or 4 hour less of a flight, you can drive instead. But yeah, it's kind of hard to have relationships when you're home half the time. Taxes, when you're self-employed, you do have to pay the full Social Security. I think, yeah, when you're an employee, you pay was it 7.5%, something like that, and then the employer kicks in the other 7.5%. When you're self-employed, you pay the whole thing, which is not fun. Although you get to write it off again later, but it's yeah, that's not good. And sometimes I find I have competition cutthroat attitudes. You're getting paid well, people are expecting results, right? And if things go wrong, it's very easy for a consultant or a contractor to get scapegoated. Um, this can happen depending on the nature of the project and the nature of the company. So that's a thing to look out for. No, not always, not always, but once in a while, something to be aware of. You gotta like CYA, although CYAs probably applies no matter what you're doing. Um, and then I wrote this thing about H-1B visa. In my industry, H-1B visa is a way to let foreigners, non-US citizens come here and do IT jobs. And in my industry, it's just abused. You're only supposed to hire these folks when you can't find a US citizen, and they're supposed to get paid the prevailing wage, right? They're not supposed to come in as a discount. And this was happening a lot. They were just selling these folks really short and then not hiring US citizens. This has gotten better over time. It's better. But I mean, I don't know, 10 years ago, it's just horrible. It was really abusive and no one cared. It was weird. All right, let's see. All right, and this is all right. So this is maybe the worst of freelancing. Sometimes you can't get a gig. Sometimes there could be lean times where there's no work. So yeah, I painted like a nice picture. You make some good money, but if things are dried up, if we're in a recession, like I've gone for a year without working. And when you don't work, guess what? You qualify for Medicaid. I'm not really proud of this, but I'm just be honest. Yeah, when you don't have income for a year, you qualify for Medicaid. So that's me out of when it was some years back. Where is it? 2013. Yeah. Qualified for Medicaid, and actually Medicaid kicks butt because it pays for everything when you're using it. Now that when I'm doing well, I'm on the exchange and I'm paying a lot of money for really not a lot of coverage. But I'm making money, so that's a trade-off. I'd rather that than not work and have a Medicaid card. But yeah, just it's not. There's pros and cons to doing this. The other one, I guess, good thing in this, in during the COVID situation, because there's so many freelancers, freelancers were able to get unemployment, and that was pretty cool. Prior to that, prior to COVID, that did not happen. Like, yeah, I did during this time, I did not get any unemployment. But so that worked out because I was out of work for like 6 weeks in 2020 during the height of COVID, and I was able to get unemployment insurance. So that was pretty cool. All right. Lessons learned. Yeah, you got to be disciplined with your money. If all of a sudden you start making double the rate and you're getting lots of money in, it's tempting to just go hog wild and buy a bunch of stuff that you always wanted. But you got to pay your taxes. You got to pay that double. That 15%. There's quarterly taxes that you have to pay. If you don't pay them, you get dinged with fees and interest charges. So yeah, it's and there's no withholding. That's the other thing too. You get a paycheck, there's so much money that's withheld, and so those taxes are being paid. When you're just getting a check from a client, they're not withholding any tax money. You got to pay it yourself. So yeah, you don't want any problems with the IRS. You always want to pay them first. This middle one, let's see. I'm wavering a little bit this one as time has gone on. Is because this happened to me, a real life situation where somebody was asking me, what is your code doing here? What's happening here? And I was like, I don't know. And one of the other consultants took me aside. He's like, you never say you don't know. Never say you don't know. Because it makes you look like you're not doing your job. And companies are not paying you that, double the rate to not know. They want you to know. But as a caveat to this, you're not always going to know everything. Like, it's impossible. So one of the things you could do, instead of saying I don't know, you can say, well, let me look into that. Why? Okay, why is this happening? Why is this thing dumping out? Give me a few minutes. Let me go back and debug through it. There's ways of saying you don't know that sound better, that sound more professional. Give me a couple hours. Let me play with this and let me get back to you. And so that's like a better way of saying you don't know. Stay true to yourself. Let's see. I've never had any luck with there's a site called Upwork, where you can get gigs, and I've just never had any luck with it. For one thing, the rates are usually in the toilet. They're just terrible rates. And the one experience I did have was so weird. I know we're getting short on the time here. This company, or these guys, wanted me to impersonate another consultant that had SAP expertise. They were working with one of their clients, and they swore that they got this other guy, like this other guy that was a guru, and he dropped out. And they didn't want to tell the client, so they were they were looking at me to try to like pretend I was this person, and because I had SAP knowledge, that maybe I could do it. And I was entertaining this at a time when I wasn't working, right? So I was a little bit desperate. So I was thinking about it, but then ultimately I didn't do it, right? Because it was just too slimy. I mean, it was just, so that's why I say you got to stay true to yourself. Whatever, no matter what situation you're in, if somebody's asking you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with, or it's illegal, or like, or to lie, I mean, it's just, what's your integrity worth, right? And for me, I just, I couldn't do it. And then who knows, if these guys were so slimy, maybe they wouldn't have paid me. Maybe I would have done it, and then they would just not paid me. So yeah, if they were that, uh, unlawful in their business practices, who knows what they were doing. And then also maybe could have been a test. I doubt it was a test. It's a little too weird. All right, let's see. Oh, all right. So that was my last slide. Yeah, I really like freelancing. Like I said, I got burned out in the corporate world. And I'm not saying that the corporate world is bad. I mean, some people have great experiences. You got to go for it. When you're looking for a job, you just got to start anywhere. Take anything you can get and build yourself up. And there are some good companies out there. There's companies that are aware of balance, you know, they'll treat you well. And if you find a really good company, it's a good idea to stick with them, you know, if they're investing in you. But my experiences, I've worked for average companies and it burned me out. And I just I like being paid well for doing a good job. That's my philosophy. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, I do, if you don't mind. So
Yeah,
you said
sure.
you kind of have to learn, you know, one of the lessons that you learned was to be disciplined with your money. So was there a strategy that you implemented within your disciplinary actions for yourself to kind of like, you know, be able to set your money aside and pay those taxes? Or what was your plan?
So luckily, this was not a problem to me. Luckily, my mother was a very strong, frugal, physically conservative type of individual, and I inherited those genes. So yeah, this was not difficult for me to just put it in the bank, you know, and not touch it. So for example, when I hear about people can't pay their credit card bills every month, like it's like they're paying interest, they can't, or they're living paycheck to paycheck. To me, that is super foreign, because I've always known to just save. You know, I'm a saver, and I don't buy it if I can't afford it. You know, if I don't have the cash, like to me, a credit card, um, I I treat it like it's cash. If I don't have the cash, I can't afford it, or I'll wait, or I'll save for it. And actually use credit cards. I make money with credit cards. I get those, you know, 1%, 2% cash back cards, and get tons of money back. Um, so I know for other people it would be tough, but I think that's what you have to do. You just have to train yourself to realize that, you know, this is not my money. I need 500 bucks. I need 500 bucks a month to pay my medical. That's my medical bill. I need so much to do this, so much to do that. I got to pay, $10,000 every quarter to Uncle Sam for quarterly taxes between, federal and state. So you take it off the top, and it's not your money.
Yeah.
That's how you have to think about that. Like,
Right.
that's how I think about it. And then it's easier, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
the reason why I asked is because I do have a couple friends who own their own businesses, and the plan that they have implemented themselves was to open a separate account and just to put all of their a percentage of their earnings that they would pay in taxes and just have it in that account and not touch it at all. And then when it comes tax season or those quarterly times that you have to pay your taxes, they just use that account to pay the taxes. So I wanted to know what your plan was, but thank you.
no, and that's a good idea. I mean, I do have business accounts yeah, you don't want to do any commingling of funds, they call it. So
Mhm.
I've got personal accounts, personal checking, savings, all that stuff. And then I have business accounts. And all the checks that come from the customers go into the business account. And then I pay myself occasionally, right? I'll, move money from the business account into my personal account, paying myself. So that's sort of what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, just and yeah, if you don't see it, you don't look at those accounts, you kind of forget that it's there. But the money is there when you need it for business purposes. Excellent. Any other questions, or anyone curious about going the freelance route?
Archel, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you have a question? You posted something in chat.
Oh, well, when he was talking about the eyewear, I was wondering if the company was Luxottica, the one he was thinking of.
It's not Luxottica it was called VSP, the name of the company.
Got it. Got it.
And what VSP do, they work with all those guys. They work with Luxottica and Salvatore Ferragamo and all those different eyewear companies. They work with them. Yeah.
Jordan, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you mute yours, please? So I was thinking about going the freelance route, and just recently on my trip to Oklahoma, a friend, we had some conversation about doing this course and how in March I will most likely be pursuing that freelance aspect. He wants to be my first client. He
Awesome.
has a website, or he has websites that need to be created. He works for the medical marijuana industry in Oklahoma, and he ran some things by me that sound pretty awesome, but also like a good first project, like a first freelance project, I should say.
Mm.
Do you have any tips of like either A, working with a friend, or B, also working possibly on just like my first project?
Okay. So I think, yeah, with a friend, that's actually right off the bat, that's pretty good. He knows that, you're a student, to expect miracles right off the bat. But I think the main thing you got to be is definitely be honest. He might say, can you do this? And you have to think about it for a minute and say, well, maybe give me a month, yeah, you have to be honest and try to be careful on what you promise. And then what you really need to do is you need to have like kind of a scope document. Decide how you're going to be paid. For me, so there's something called fixed price. Never do fixed price. That's when, I don't know, you say you're going to deliver this soup to nuts product in 3 months, and I'm going to pay you $40,000. Unless you really know what what you can deliver, and you really have good, excellent requirements, fixed price can be a nightmare. What I do, I've never done fixed price. I've always been what they call T&E, time and expenses. So you're essentially like an employee. You still have a project, you still have work to do, but you just get, you get 40 hours a week. Plus, if you have to travel, then that's expenses. But then, yeah, you need to have the scope of what, this. So this product's going to do, this website's going to do this, this, and this, and this. And, for week 1, I'm going to tackle this. And then week 2 will be this, week 3. So you have like a plan, right? So that's the best way to do it. Always be upfront and honest about everything. If something's taking longer, which happens, right? You could get stuck on something. Your best bet is to say, hey, John, I got stuck on this. It's taking longer than I expected. Please be patient. And that's much better than, kind of BSing somebody and say, yeah, I'm going to get it. And then you don't deliver it. Your best bet is to be honest upfront as soon as possible, so that the client is not surprised. That's the best, even though they might not be happy, but they'll be, they really won't be happy if you really pull a fast one. 2 months you do anything. So yeah, communication, huge.
Also,
That's-
another question. I know I'm going to require a photographer for the images that he wants on there. I don't even know what to look for in a good photographer. Like, how do you even hire a photographer like that? You like, I need you to take pictures of weed, or is it like a business? Like, I just don't know.
I mean, I don't know how to hire a photographer either. That's another thing, like working with another vendor. I haven't had to do that. But just in general, I would, tap your network, like even your class. Hey, who knows a good photographer? Like, I know I have a friend of mine who is like, he's in a photography club. So, I mean, I could give you a recommend. Well, I don't know if he does weed, but I think this guy, he does wedding. He does everything. But for something like that, I would just ask around and try to get a recommendation from somebody. I wouldn't go just by like off the web or just, sight unseen kind of thing. I would, tap your network for recommendations, and then get some samples, and, do an interview, to have a conversation with the person and see if you get a good feeling of working with them. And then, yeah, just like, if you're going to hire someone to fix your roof or whatever it is that you're hiring for, you want to do your due diligence, as they say, and hopefully it works out. Hopefully it'll be a good relationship.
Awesome. Thank you, because I am definitely going to do that.
Yeah.
And that also goes, just want to chime in here, for any kind of freelance work, right? There's some crazy statistic like 80% of all jobs, whether freelance or full-time W-2 positions, come from some kind of networking. And then there's also a crazy statistic on like 60% of jobs are never posted. It's just people who in the company that hear about it, share it with friends, whatever. And so there's a lot of freelance work where you may be getting a 6-month contract, but the way you find that is a friend who's a freelancer who can't do the gig himself, right? He's already on another one. And so they may share that with you and say, hey, I can't take this work on. I'm booked right now. Or would you be interested in it, right? There are great communities. OpenHack is one of them, right? Where you can get to know people there. And some people may have requirements, may show up to a meetup like that. I don't know, Glenn, if you have any advice on where to find work or how to get started on that.
Yes, that's my next question, was how do I find freelance work outside of Jake?
So, testify to the networking stuff. I mean, that definitely works. Well, I'll talk about my experience. Initially, when I first started out, I was basically going to the websites, Monster and Dice.com and those type of sites, Indeed. And so this is like 20 years ago, and I was able to find some halfway decent gigs. Now, I never use them anymore. Well, they usually have the lowest paying gigs if you have to go to the websites. But of course, after doing this for a while, I do have a network of recruiters. I'm probably on 500 recruiter lists across the country. And when these recruiters get opportunities, when they get gigs, they email their network, and so I'll get alerted, or they'll call me. Hey, Glenn, I need an SAP guy for 6 months in St. Louis starting on March 1st, and paying such and such. Can you do it? And I'll be like, well, okay, maybe can I start March 15th, or I don't know, or can they do better on the rate? Blah blah blah. Well, that's talking about negotiating, but so I have a network of recruiters. Now what I do, SAP is kind of niche. So it's and not in the Syracuse area, but I will share this. I do a lot of networking. I do it for fun, and I like to help other people. Actually, I get a lot of satisfaction from helping others. If I could help someone get a job, that it's awesome. But there was a company in Ithaca. Let's go back to 2018. There's a meetup. There's a meetup in Ithaca called Ithaca Web People. Somebody had posted that they needed an SAP person in Ithaca on their on the Ithaca Web People meetup board. 2 people from Syracuse that were all, I was not on that meetup, that Ithaca meetup, but like somebody else from, I think, software, CNY software development, OpenHack, 2 individuals said, hey, Glenn, there's somebody in Ithaca looking for an SAP person. That did lead to a job. I worked there for 18 months. That was awesome. And that really came about because of networking, and people knew that I'm an SAP guy. Like, I'm the only SAP person in Syracuse. Like, there's a few other people, but I'm the one that really puts it out there, right? People kind of make fun of me at OpenHack because I have the same speech, every month. It's, hey, SAP software, 3rd largest software company in the world, freelance, but people know that's what I do. And so just that one gig alone, 18 months of work, worth all, every networking thing I ever did, paid for itself with that gig. So yeah, definitely go to go to many things as you can. Yeah, as much as you can. You just never know who you're going to meet.
And
yeah.
I think Glenn will agree with me on this, but the hardest part is always getting started, right? The hardest part is always building your network. And you guys know that from going through this course, right? The first couple of weeks were always the hardest, right? Where you're like, I have no idea what I'm learning. This is a whole new format. I have to follow this guy who codes crazy fast, right? And now you show up to class and you're ready for it, right? And you're learning these new things, and it's almost like your brain is more absorbent now that we've been doing it for enough time. The same goes for after graduation, right? It was hard for Glenn probably to get started because he didn't have that network. He didn't know where to look. It was always tough because he may have had an interview and they may have said, hey, you're great, but you don't have a portfolio built up, or you don't have other clients that can attest to how well of an SAP expert you are. But as you go, you start building up your network, right? You may finish one job and that company may say, hey, we don't have any more work for you, but we work with these 10 other companies and they all use SAP. Let me get you in touch with them. There's all different ways that you can kind of get started, but that beginning part is almost always the hardest.
Yeah, I agree. It's a function of a couple things, like how the general market's going too. If people are clamoring for developers, it'll be easier to be like, well, I just finished this CIC, and I'm a good listener, and I have a good work ethic, and I look at the work I've done with JavaScript and all this. It'll maybe be easier. If it's a tougher market, won't quite be as easy, but you just have to be persistent and continue going for it. And yeah, it took me a few months. It did take me a few months to land a gig, and it wasn't the highest paying gig, but when you're starting out, you get what you can get, and then you build your skills from there, and then you get more and more lucrative gigs as you get better and more experienced.
Schneider, you have a question?
Hi, Glenn. Quick question. I've pondered freelancing as well and whatnot. Like, in your experience, what would you say the risks are when it comes to freelancing?
The risks. Let me see. Well, like I showed you my Medicaid card. Before you didn't qualify for unemployment before. I don't know if that got extended now. I know they did it for COVID, but like that back in 2013, whatever that was, you don't get paid. There was nothing. I didn't, if I didn't work for a year, I got zero coming in. I'm living off of my savings, which is another reason to be disciplined, because you got to save for that rainy day. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if this unemployment thing is extended after COVID. I hope it does, but it might not be. Let's see. Yeah, you got to be prepared for the down times. I already told you that it can be, cutthroat. It's possible when things go south. Sometimes a company might try to blame, you for why it's not working or whatever, the failure. So you just need to be mindful that you're doing the right things and documenting it.
I think getting started might be a little harder, right? When you come in as a W-2 employee, there's a little bit more loyalty there between you and the company you're working for. So they're going to invest maybe a little bit more in your training or getting you involved in the way that they do things. And as a 1099, you're kind of expected to come in and be the expert, right? What Glenn was saying earlier, you don't say, I don't know, you say, let me find out for you. And as a 1099, you may not have a network to go to or to ask that question or find out. But if you're at a W-2, especially at a larger employer, oftentimes they'll have some kind of onboarding process for you, or some training, or some additional resources, or a mentor you can ask at the company. And that's not to say as a freelancer, you'll never work in a team. There are definitely times that a company will hire a team of freelancers that may be all independent, but work together for that 6-month period or whatever it may be. And then I think Glenn also mentioned a really good one of accounting is just harder, right? You're going to be on the hook for writing your own contract or reviewing a contract, communications, that freedom kind of comes with a trade-off. You get the freedom of them giving you this work and saying, hey, this has got to be done in 6 months. And there is usually regular reporting, but I have seen a lot of junior developers kind of freeze up, right? And be like, I don't know what I'm doing. The imposter syndrome creeps in. And sometimes you fall back on not having great communication. And that's almost always a recipe for disaster, right? So almost always the better answer is to communicate with the client and say, hey, it turns out this feature that you asked for, I've got to do more research into how to do it. Is it okay that this deadline is taking a little longer? And it totally depends on the client. If they're hiring you as a senior developer, they may be disappointed, right? They may say, well, you're the expert here and you're causing some delays. But oftentimes, if you are saying, hey, I'm just getting started here, I'm giving you a break on the price, this may take me twice as long to figure out how to do, but you're paying me a third of what you would pay a senior developer to come in and just knock it out. And normally I found in my freelance experience that it's pretty contractors will be pretty flexible with you. And as long as you are communicating and letting them know why it's taking longer, and saying, hey, I didn't expect to run into this problem. This is what I ran into. This is how I'm planning on fixing it. This is the resource that I'm using to learn a little bit more about it. Normally, I have found that more communication leads to a happier client than someone saying, hey, give me 2 weeks and I'll get this done for you. And then 2 weeks rolls around and you don't have any updates for them because you're scared, you're freezing up. In those situations, I personally have found over communication is much better than under communication.
Yeah, I agree. Communication is number one. I would take a good developer with awesome communication skills over a great developer with poor communication skills, because the great developer with poor communication skills is going to be wasting a lot of time building things you don't want. So yeah, the good developer with the awesome communication skills, it's gonna be more effective and efficient in the long run. Yep. I don't know if I answered the question. Kind of a rehash of stuff I said before. You don't want to over deliver. You don't want to promise things you can't, that you can't deliver. You got to be honest and communicate.
Thank you.
I just have one more question, if you don't mind. So
Yeah.
how does one person go about becoming an SAP expert? Like, what do you have to know? What does it entail? Is it the back end, a front end, or is it full stack? Like, I'm not understanding what you do as an SAP.
So SAP is a software system. Businesses run their operations on SAP. So there's sales and distribution, there's warehouse management, there's production planning, human resources, of course, supply chain management. All these functions. There's software, out of the box software there, and then someone like myself does customization, because every company is different. So there's a core functionality that's there, and then there's additional functionality that gets added by someone like me. So I consider myself full stack. Right now, the work that I'm doing is more back end. This client I'm working for, they're treating their SAP system as their back end, and they have this fancy web front end. So yeah, you could actually be front end, back end, or full stack with SAP. I consider myself full stack. I just got a job with a company that was implementing SAP. The company that shafted me on the bonus, that's where I learned my SAP. Yeah, it's kind of hard to just pick it up just like on your own. I think there is training, like everyone else. There's free training sites, like Salesforce. I know has a training site as well if you want to become a Salesforce developer. But yeah, I basically picked it up. I was a developer. I had 10 years of development experience and some weird weird stuff when I came to SAP and picked up the SAP skills. Yeah.
Thank
To
you.
give you context there, I know Apple uses SAP, and the way they use SAP is they have all of these Apple stores, right? And they needed to manage what iPhones are showing up at what Apple stores and tracking the inventory and making sure it made it, from the factories in China all the way to the Apple store in Destiny, right? And so what they looked at is they said, hey, is it better to build this ourselves? Because of course they have full stack developers right inside of the Apple, they've got thousands of engineers on staff. But they looked at it and there's always a mentality of buy versus build. Is it cheaper for us to build this from scratch and maintain it and have our developers work on it? Or is it better to buy a solution like SAP that may have an inventory module built right in? So you can kind of compare it to React, right? We could build this this code in vanilla HTML and it would do the exact same thing, but there are efficiencies built into React like state and all of that stuff that we end up using instead of building those from scratch. And so when you work with, when you buy SAP, which can cost thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, depending on what features of SAP you're using, Apple may have had all the inventory stuff that they needed, and then they came out with another color iPhone. And for whatever reason, SAP didn't have out of the box support for tracking different colors of phones. So they would either hire someone like Glenn, either full-time on their staff, to be able to update the SAP system and make it work as they wanted, or they would hire Glenn and say, hey, we need our SAP system to support colors of iPhones. We think that's going to take you 6 months to do it. We're going to pay you this much an hour over those 6 months. And then when you're done, if we have another SAP thing that we need done, we may extend your contract or give you a new one. Or if we're looking at our SAP and we're like, we're great, everything's working, that may be another downside of freelancing, right? Is that you are not paid indefinitely. You're not just an employee on payroll. You may be project specific. And when that project is over, the company says, great working with you. Thank you for communicating. You did everything that we asked you to do. Now go find another job.
Yeah. And kind of going along with that, another downside, and in the beginning of the meetings, you were talking about, you only have 5 days of vacation. I don't have any vacation. When I take time off, it's just you don't get paid. So that's, but we get paid well. Like when you are working, you're getting paid very well. So it's technically that's your vacation. But if I take a week off, I just don't get paid for that week. But I don't know. It's a different philosophy. All right. Anything else? All right. Hey, thank you very much. It was great to share my experience with you folks. And my parting words, I say this to every cohort. This is the best decision you've made in your lives to get into this field. It's one of the best industries in the world. No matter how hard it is, just keep plugging away, keep trying, put as much time as you can into this, and it's going to work out. It'll pay dividends in the long run. Best of luck. And
Thank you, Glenn, so much.
Yeah. Feel free to connect with me. Here's my contact info. Feel free to, when you see me at Open Hack, feel free to, talk to me, ask me questions. And all right. All the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Cheers.
So just to tag on to Glenn's presentation, if you are interested in freelancing, my biggest piece of advice is find someone else who does other freelance work. If you can find a freelancer in the software area, in the software arena, great. But you don't have to limit yourself to that, right? There are you can open it up to the entire self-employment field, right? Find someone who's opened a business, find someone who runs a restaurant, right? Hit up your friends and family, right? Chances are you know someone who knows someone who would happily sit down with you and have a cup of coffee, right? All of that stuff matters. The first time that you get paid, you're going to be like, well, what do I do with this? I need a business bank account, I think, but how do I start a business? And you're going to go down that route and go, oh, okay, I can be a sole proprietor, or I can be an LLC, or I can be a corporation. What's the difference between an S Corp and a C Corp? I didn't even know there were different kinds of corporations. What happens if my person paying me is from out of state? How do I get health insurance? How do I, right? There's this whole world of not just freelancing, but being an entrepreneur in general that takes a lot to get started, right? So find someone that you can rely on. They may not be able to answer those questions for you. They may say, hey, I had an attorney set up my business for me, and they said S Corp, C Corp, LLC, and I went into the alphabet soup and they advised this one, and that's how I got started, right? That's great. Ask them for a recommendation for their attorney, see if they're taking new clients. There is definitely a whole world, and it feels like a bottomless pit. When you get started in entrepreneurship, you always feel like there's another thing to learn, just like software development. But the good news is you do finally find the bottom of the pool, right? You do start to go wade in and realize that you're not just in the deep end and that you can get started doing business. I have made the conscious decision that I work better in a team. I work better as a W-2 employee. I love hiring my team. I love knowing that I get my paycheck every 2 weeks. I love knowing that I'm going to have my health insurance covered or have an employer contribute to it. There are a lot of perks to being a W-2 employee, especially as a junior developer, but there are a ton of perks of being freelance, right? And having that opportunity and saying, you know what? Hey, I just made twice as much as I would make as a W-2 employee. So now that I've got these couple weeks of unemployment, while I'm searching for a new gig, I'm going to use that to take some time off or go travel, or, hey, I'm going to be still doing my job search, but now I've got the opportunity to maybe brush up on some skills. Maybe something popped up during that gig that I went, wow, I really need to practice with this thing. Let me go find those resources. Let me go make sure some mistake that I made during that gig, I don't make again. So there are pros and cons to freelancing. Just some terminology to throw your way, because freelancing as a developer is very popular, more so than maybe some other industries. But if you ever hear yourself being called full-time or a W-2 employee, that's how you guys have probably gotten paid so far in life, right? You either work a certain number of hours or you're salaried. You're going to negotiate your salary and get some benefits with that, but you are an employee of that company. That company is responsible for keeping you on payroll and paying you until they let you go, right? They terminate you. As a 1099, it is called a 1099 because that's the tax form that you get at the end of the year. I actually have my 1099 here. Let me try to obfuscate some of this information from Hack Upstate. This is, a tax form that you guys get every year, and it says 1099 NEC, which stands for non-employment compensation. Used to be a 1099 miss for miscellaneous income. But anyway, they are paying you hourly, or they can pay you a flat rate for the project. As Glenn mentioned, there are a lot of benefits to getting paid hourly, but for someone just getting started, there are benefits to getting paid a flat rate and saying, hey, it may take me 40 hours to build this website for you instead of 20 hours, but we agree on this rate. This is the amount that I'm going to get paid. Pros and cons to both of them. But that's when you want to rely on some mentorship network, right? Go send a proposal to someone who is a small business owner and say, hey, I know you may not be in in software development, but I'm proposing to build this website for someone. This is the proposal I'm sending them. As a small business owner, how would you react to this, right? Get some advice from them. Lean on me, right? I don't go away after graduation. I've been around, I've done freelancing, and after a year of freelancing, I went, no, I want to work at a company. I think that's a better fit for me. And that's okay, right? Everyone's going to be a little different. Jordan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, is Laura Thorne someone who does freelance?
Yes.
Yeah.
So almost everyone at Hack Upstate is paid as a 1099, right? They are paid as a contractor. Freelance is I guess 1099 and freelancing go pretty hand in hand. You know, those are questions to ask when you're getting hired. You may assume that you're getting hired as a W-2, but there are some rules around getting paid as a 1099, getting paid as a contractor, that the company certainly cannot violate. So getting paid as a contractor, one of the requirements is they cannot mandate the hours that you work or where you work. So they can say, hey, we need you to build this website, but they can't say, we need you to build this website in our office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now they may say, hey, we need, as part of this contract, you're going to be flying out and you're going to need to be in our office to work with our employees, but they can't mandate certain work hours. There is some other requirements around, they can't give you company equipment and not have you return it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice here. I would never, I can tell you about what my experience is with an LLC and an S Corp and registering in different states and how I do invoicing and all of that stuff, but not an attorney, not giving legal advice. There are some rules around being a 1099. And the main reasoning behind that is when you are a W-2, as Glenn mentioned earlier, your employer is paying half of your Social Security and half of a couple other taxes. So when you get your paycheck and you go, whoa, I thought I was getting paid $1,000 a week. Why am I only getting paid $750? You see that line item for federal income tax withholding and Social Security and Medicare. Well, it turns out that your employer doesn't pay exactly half of those, but they do pay into that as well. So even though you may think that you're getting paid $50,000 a year and you may be paying $10,000 a year in taxes, your employer may be paying anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 on top of your $50,000 that they paid you. And so when you are self-employed and you go to file your taxes, you go, man, this is great. I got $50,000 this year. Well, it turns out that none of that withholding automatically applies as a 1099. And so now not only do you have a $10,000 tax bill, you may have a $20,000 tax bill because not only do you need to pay your part of Social Security and Medicare and your income tax, you have to pay the employer's part of that as well because you're self-employed. You are your employer. And so now not only do you have a $10,000 tax bill that nothing was withheld from, you may have a $20,000 tax bill because you've got to pay into Social Security and all of that kind of stuff. Those are rough numbers. Don't quote me on that. But Exona, to I think it was your point of having a friend who has a separate bank account, right? And they kind of put their taxes away. Not only do you have to do that, and pay that tax bill at the end of April, if you are going to owe $1,000 or more on your taxes, with a couple exceptions, you need to pay quarterly taxes. 4 times a year, you need to not only pay the IRS, but also pay the state and say, hey, I don't know exactly what my tax bill is going to be, but there's a way to estimate what your taxes will be based off of how much money you're expected to bring in, and you need to pay that every quarter. So there's all kinds of intricacies of freelancing, and that's when having a good attorney is great, having a good accountant is great. having someone who pays those taxes or is paid as a freelancer or has some kind of self-employment, you can definitely rely on that network to give you advice there. I am someone who has been on both sides of that. I am someone who has been a W-2. I am someone who has been a 1099. Obviously, as usual, I have a lot to say about the subject. I will not ramble on for too long, but I find I am going to share something with you guys called the Agile Manifesto before we go on break. I promise after break, we will jump into coding. I will not ramble on about self-employment forever, but I love when Glenn comes in because there are all different kinds of tangents that I love to go on with self-employment. And the reason why I talk about it and take up so much class time and why I always love when Glenn comes in is freelancing is a great way to get started. Freelancing is less of a risk for the company because they are not agreeing to pay you forever. It is much harder to terminate someone who is on payroll and is a W-2 employee than it is to terminate a contractor to say, hey, this isn't working out. I'm going to terminate our contract. We're going to go separate ways. And so for that reason, a lot of companies will actually say that we have a path from 1099 to W-2. They may hire you for a certain project. It may be a 3-month project. You work with them. If all goes well, they may give you a full-time W-2 offer and say, hey, you've proven yourself. We love what you're doing. We've got more work at the company. Let's go ahead and bring you on. Or they may say at the end of the 1099, hey, turns out this project is wrapping up. We don't have the money to bring you on to payroll. Sorry, thank you for your work. Or they may say, hey, they may give you a job offer and you go, honestly, I would prefer to be 1099. I would prefer to do a project by project basis. I prefer to make a little bit more money and then have to cover my healthcare costs or have the risk of a project drying up. And that's totally okay too, right? Everyone has different experiences with freelance. It does become easier the more experience you get when you are an expert, whether it's SAP or specific language or framework. It is easier to find those jobs, but it does take time to build up your network, and it is often easier to find work as a 1099, especially as a junior developer, because there is less risk to the company to hire you that way.
Before we move on to anything else, I kind of wanted to share something with you guys really quick. So I don't know if you guys know this, but if you go on LinkedIn Learning, you can actually sign up for free using your library card. So the numbers on the back of your library card, you can sign up with those numbers and then you'll get a free membership with them, and you can watch like complete courses. So they have like SAP, ERP essential training courses on there. So pretty much any course, any language that you want to learn, you'll kind of get like the at least like, you know, just the basics of it if you take a couple courses and watch a couple videos on there. So I just wanted to share that with everyone because I didn't know. I found out today. So I was like, maybe there's someone else that doesn't know it. But yeah, so take advantage of that if you can.
I just posted a link in the live stream to that, only because if you go in through LinkedIn on like the LinkedIn Learning side of it, it can be hard to create an account with a library. But if you start at that link specifically, it makes it much easier to log into LinkedIn Learning. If you guys have not heard of LinkedIn Learning, it was previously called Lynda, Lynda. And it got bought, obviously, by LinkedIn and rebranded, I want to say maybe 2 years ago at this point. LinkedIn Learning is absolutely awesome. If you want to think about it kind of as YouTube, but with specific learning videos in it, that's a great way to think about it. The reason why I love LinkedIn Learning is because it is like Coursera or Udemy, except almost all the courses in LinkedIn Learning are free. Basically, the library pays a subscription to LinkedIn Learning, and as long as you have an Onondaga County library card, which you can get for free if you're an Onondaga resident, which I think almost all of you guys are, all you need is like a utility bill or some proof of address. If your driver's license has your address on it, you can go into the library, they'll give you a library card for free, and then you can use that to get into LinkedIn Learning. Don't be afraid when you get started at a job. There will be things you do not know. That is a guarantee. I could not start at any company and be guaranteed to know exactly every tool that they're going to be using. That goes for little tools like Slack, where you guys have been exposed to that, right? We send messages in Slack. You may go to a company and they go, we use Microsoft Teams. And you're like, never used that before? But that's not a reason to not apply to the job, because as soon as you get access to Teams, you're going to go, oh, this is just like Slack. The way that I send a direct message may be a little different. The keyboard shortcuts may be a little different, but the end of the day, it's still in that same kind of category of tool. LinkedIn Learning is great because you can just do a search for SAP and up will come a course that 1 million people have watched and gone through. And there's an entire structured curriculum there. There are no ads like there are on YouTube. Once you find that you like that teacher, you may find that that teacher has done an advanced SAP course or has started to specialize in different modules of SAP, right? There will always be tools that you do not know how to use. And LinkedIn Learning is great because you can go there, have one library, and not need to worry about whether part 2 has been uploaded or finding the right playlist or having to pay for that particular thing. So we're actually letting you behind the curtain where the sausage is actually made. We are experimenting with ways to expand careers in code and kind of have a self-paced module where we use something like LinkedIn Learning to kind of explore and have a guided self-study kind of option that we would use to supplement the 6-month boot camp. So yes, very awesome resource. The only downside to it is that it is tricky to get for free through the library if you don't have the link that I sent. Maybe they have fixed that. But if you start at that Onondaga County link and bookmark that or put that on your desktop, it becomes much easier to sign into that system. I'm going to take a breath here. Does anyone have any questions?
Just want some clarity. Library card, right? From like the galleries downtown, that type of thing.
Yes. Almost every library in Onondaga County is linked through the same library system. So it doesn't matter if you get a library card at the Manlius Library or the galleries downtown or all the way up in Baldwinsville, you get an Onondaga County library card, and you can use that library card at any library in the county. And what's really cool about that is you can actually check out a book at one library and return it at a entirely separate library, and it makes its way back. It's because they're all part of the same library system. So any library in Onondaga County, if you've got a library card from one of them, you can use that to sign in at LinkedIn Learning.
Thank you.
And for that matter, just to give another plug to the library system, which is awesome, you can go into the library and do woodworking, 3D printing. They will give you help writing resumes and cover letters. You can have meeting spaces that you rent there. You can go online and learn language for free because you're connected. Online books, audiobooks, I don't think there's anything you can't do with it now.
If you happen to be a homeowner, if you look at your, I think it's the town tax bill, you will see that you actually pay for the library, and it's a couple $100 if you're a homeowner. However, it is, in my opinion, worth every single penny. I cannot tell you the thousands of dollars I have saved checking out books from the library, using resources. They actually have, almost every library has the New York State Empire Pass. So if you're going to any state park, you can check out that pass if it's available at the library and go to the state park for free and not have to pay for parking and that kind of stuff. The library is an amazing resource. If you did not use it as a kid, you may not be exposed to everything that the library provides for you. Do not let that stop you. There are a ton of great resources. I actually have a sign out on my mailbox that I 3D printed at the Fayetteville library, or I actually laser cut it. And so now I have this really cool custom sign with my logo on my mailbox that lights up at night. And I was able to use like a $8,000 laser cutter, and literally you could see this printer going around and cutting my name out of plastic. And you would never think like, hey, I'm going to go to a library, where all the books are, in order to cut this cool 3D design that I made. So library is an awesome resource. Definitely use it. And I use LinkedIn Learning all the time. There are times that if I'm finding something super niche that LinkedIn Learning will not have, but I almost always use that as a starting place before I end up going over to YouTube or Udemy or Coursera, only because I don't know what their model is in terms of paying instructors, but you're essentially getting a bunch of paid content for free because you are a member of the library. So there are some employers, that's their main business model for LinkedIn Learning, where an employer will pay $10 a month per employee, or some amount. I'm not sure what it is, but they will pay for you to have access to LinkedIn Learning because they have such a great library of resources.
Max, can I just toss in another thing about the library? I actually had a peer who lost his computer, so he wasn't able to code, and the library will lend you a computer and the internet. So that's just nice. Like, say you had a laptop now, but you can't actually access the internet when you leave home, you can go and get this pack from them. It's a computer pack, I think, and you can use the internet on your own device, or you can use those together or what have you. But it's just nice to know that, like, I'm a huge fan of the library too, that they have they can give you a computer and the internet.
Absolutely. Lots of great resources. If you have not gotten a library card, even if you don't plan on using these resources, it is definitely worth picking one up. There are, I want to say, almost 30 different libraries across the county. Chances are you are not more than 15 minutes away, 15-minute drive away from them. The one in the galleries downtown, or I guess it used to be called the galleries downtown, is awesome. They have a recording studio in there if you want to like use it for a podcast or recording music. The one downtown also has a maker space with the 3D printers and the laser cutters. And the one out in Fayetteville is probably my favorite. Only because those libraries that just feel cozy, that have like all these different nooks and you can just hang out. They've got a cafe in the Fayetteville one, which I absolutely love, grabbing like a latte and having your espresso fix for the morning and just hanging out there. I am obviously a huge library fan. So if you don't have a library card, take advantage of your tax dollars works, or your landlord's tax dollars at work, and pick up a library card.
And Fayetteville really is the best one because a friend of mine runs it. So highly recommend them.
Yeah, lots of great resources that you think, oh, why do we need libraries anymore? All of our books are online. Speaking of which, you can also check out books online using Libby, and almost all the major books you can get on your Kindle or read on your phone, audiobooks, ebooks, everything you can get through the library as well.
Cool.
Okay, I will shut up about how great the library is and how great of a resource it is. Our county does have one of the best ones in particular. Okay, one more thing and then I'll shut up. You can also get a New York Public Library card for free. You apply online and you have to email in a copy of your license and I think a utility bill. And you may think, well, why would I get a New York Public Library card? I'm nowhere near the city. Well, you get access to all of New York Public Library's resources as well, for ebooks and audiobooks and all of that stuff. So every now and then there will be an ebook that I want to get that Onondaga County does not have, but it turns out New York Public Library has it. So it takes a couple days. You may have to mail something in, although I think they've moved everything online. But that is another free library card that you can get from your tax dollars at work. Okay, I'm going to shut up about all of that. I want to get this in really quickly. I actually planted the seed for Laura here. We are going to touch on something called the Agile Manifesto, only because this is a great resource for not only freelancing, but any kind of business relationship that you have. So back in 2001, these software developers and these business owners got together. This is in the 2001 with the dot-com bubble. Internet was just coming out and was becoming popular. Everyone's starting to get PC in their home. We're kind of riding this technology wave. And there was some frustration of building software, right? And the way software was traditionally built was this project management technique called waterfall development. And waterfall development kind of required everyone to work in lockstep. We do this, and then once that is done, we do this next requirement. And once that requirement is done, we do this next one. And it took years and years sometimes to build software, right? We had Windows 95, and then it took 3 years to get to Windows 98. And so these, 20-ish people got together and said, hey, there's got to be a better way to build software. And they wrote up this manifesto. If this website looks like it's from the early 2000s, it is. This website has not changed since 2001, except for the fact that they did add HTTPS to make it secure. I'm just going to read this aloud and go into the 12 principles, because you may notice that there is now a poster hung up on my wall. And these are, the poster is the 12 items of Agile software development. It is the 12 principles. But when you think about this, any interaction that you have, whether it's going to be a W-2 as an employee where your boss is going to give you something to build, whether it's working with another member on your team, whether it's doing freelance work and communicating to your client, whether it is your company working with another company, chances are when something goes wrong or when you're doing something particularly well, it all falls down into these 12 principles of the Agile Software Manifesto. So interactions and individuals over processes and tools. What matters most is that you are taking advantage of talent, not necessarily trying to shoehorn that talent into a particular tool. You guys know, as much as I love JavaScript, sometimes if you've got a bunch of individuals that are all Python experts, no matter how much you use Python or how much you love JavaScript, you should let them use Python. So individuals and interactions, letting them communicate, figuring out how they kind of work together, steering their communication, and knowing that listening is more important than speaking. Ironic coming from me, I know, but individuals and interactions more important than processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. This is a controversial one of Agile software development, but it's more important that what your users are working on is working over, hey, this software is really complicated to use, but that's okay because we've provided you a 100-page manual of how to use our software. So getting the software working, investing time into the output and the interactions is way more important than having a long list of documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Hey, contracts are important. That is the way business gets done. That is what officially makes you a freelance developer. But it's more important to make sure that you guys are collaborating, that when work does need to get done, that you are working on both sides of the contract, both the customer and yourself, as opposed to hashing it out legally and making sure that the legalese and the contracts are airtight.
Hey,
And
Max, Max,
Yes.
I'm sorry to bother you, but did you mind clicking to the 12 principles so they can read along if they wanted to, or did you have it up?
I'm not there yet.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
these are the core ideas, and then the ideas are broken out into those 12 principles.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
see.
just going through kind of these 4 lines here.
Okay.
And then I will switch over to the 12 principles.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, you're good. Thank you. And then finally, responding to change. This is the biggest thing that Agile introduced over waterfall software development. Change is going to happen. Things are going to pop up. And we shouldn't be so rigid to say, hey, we'll get around to implementing that in 4 years. When changes come up, when things need to be made, make sure that you are ready for change. Make sure that you are able to say, hey, we can implement that. But if we implement that, there are going to be consequences of that change. This original feature that we planned on may not work until later. Is that okay? Or is this change so big that we're not going to keep on developing something that ends up not being used because a change happens? There is never, ever, ever a software project that you will work on where a change will not be involved. Sometimes it's a small change of, hey, I changed the font. I want to use this different font. Is that okay? Yeah, sure, no problem. It may take us a little while to get that font changed, but we will change it everywhere. Or is this something huge where you go, oh, it turns out that our users can't log in anymore. What do we need to change in order to roll that out? So the value, there is and then the final note here is that while there is value of the items on the right, they're not saying that documentation isn't important. They're not saying that contract negotiation is important. They're not saying following and executing a plan isn't important. What they are saying is when one of the things on the right pops up, it is, while it is important, the thing on the left, the bigger font item here, is what is more important than the thing on the right. Any questions on those? Okay, I know it's break time, so I'm going to try and run through these really quickly and not interject a ton of commentary on that. And then I will let you guys go on break, and obviously we'll extend it a little bit. Highest priority, customer is always number one. The way we make customer the number one priority and to satisfy the customer is by shipping features when they are ready early and continuously. We're not going to wait a couple years and give them this giant deliverable when a feature is ready, when it's been tested. Instead of waiting for all of these features and shipping them all at once to the customer, we're going to give that to them continuously. If you think about this as building a website for a customer, instead of sending them the entire website and saying, hey, it's going to take me a month to build this, and sending it to them a month later and them going, I don't really like the font. Well, now you've got the font in 40 different places that you've got to go update. Instead, ship them that website as you get a page done, as you get a section done. Be concise with them and say, hey, ignore everything over here that's not ready yet, or hide that for them, but ship them features as they are ready continuously. Know that requirements are going to change. As much as you hate changing requirements, as much as they introduce more time working on the project, the more you fight that change, the more painful it is going to be to implement that change when you finally get around to it. You may talk to the client and say, hey, heads up, this change is going to take 40 hours. Are you prepared to pay me a couple $1,000s more for this change? They may come back with you. They may want to negotiate with you. They may want to say, is there a way we can implement a smaller version of this change? With all of that said, the more you fight the change, the more painful it's going to be when you have to eventually go in and implement some version of it. This ties into the first one. Deliver software frequently. Do not wait for a giant delivery, whether it's a couple weeks or a couple months. Let the customer in, let them see what you're working on. Even if they are not a technical customer, whether this is your employee or another team or freelance work, even if you're full-time, try and push for software to be delivered frequently. This is a big one. Developers like to take their ball and go work on it in the corner and then come back and say, here, I did this to the ball, right? Whatever your project is. Realize that business and developers must work together. Business is going to get some software and they're going to push back and be like, this doesn't do what we need it to do. Okay, that is okay. Work with business. Don't just say, well, this is what I made, so too bad. Understand that the reason why we are getting paid as developers is because we are building something for the business side of the team. You need to involve them in the process. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support that they need and trust them to get the job done. This is twofold. This is a double-edged sword. Identify who is the motivated person in your company. Identify who that motivated client is who is hustling to get the money to build this software that makes their job easier so that they can pay you. That is who you want to identify requirements with. That is who you want to be working with, is those people that have that extra drive. But also give them support and space to realize that building software, in case you guys haven't noticed, really freaking hard, really technical. You're going to have to learn new things. There are going to be times that you're going to be frustrated for 2 or 3 days before you have your breakthrough moment. Realize that that is all part of building a project and identify that as one of these 12 core principles. Most effective way of communicating information is face-to-face. No matter how many pages of documentation you have, no matter how many emails that you send asynchronously, no matter how many Slack conversations you have, there is a reason why all of you guys are in class tonight with video on. We are face-to-face, even though we're not in person. I still consider this face-to-face because you can communicate, because one of you can raise your hands and go, please God, shut up, Max. I get that principle. Please move on already. That is all part of running a project. And when you are not asynchronous, when you are face-to-face, that's not to say all conversation needs to be face-to-face, but there's something to be said about that. Working software is the primary measure of progress. You may have heard the letters KPI, a key performance indicator. Some of you guys may have shivers up your spine when I say a monthly or quarterly or a yearly performance interview or report. For developers, what matters the most, do we have software out in the field that people are using? If we do, we are doing our jobs well. So let's put all of these KPIs aside. It doesn't matter how many lines of code we've written. It doesn't matter how many outages we've had. It doesn't matter how much documentation we've written. It doesn't matter how many meetings we're sitting in. What matters at the end of the day, if we're doing our job well, that means that people are using our working software, and that should be the main key performance indicator. There are all different ways of measuring that. That's not to say that all those other items aren't important. What is important is, does our software work? Understanding that Agile is all about sustainable development. This is not us running a million miles an hour to get some software out, realizing that that software is completely broken. And because of that, our business team, our sponsors, our users can't use it. And that's not sustainable. So understanding that while we try and adapt to change and communicate frequently, we also need to be doing it in a way that is sustainable, right? That framework works for us. We can't be pulling off 80 hours a week every week as a developer. You're going to get fried. You're going to have to take time off, or the company's going to have to let you go, because at a certain point you burn out and there's just nothing left in the tank. So Agile software development is making sure that you are keeping a pace that you can maintain indefinitely. Sure, there will be a couple weeks where you have to work more hours. There may be a couple weeks that there aren't a ton of requirements, or you're working on an easier feature, but it is important to be able to maintain that steady pace. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. In other words, when you are keeping up on your technical changes, when you are planning things out, that's what they mean by good design, before you are implementing them. That means that we are able to change with changing requirements and be more agile, right? That's the whole point of agility, is to be able to kind of take the ebbs and flows, to be able to change as the requirements change. This is one of my favorites. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. Doesn't matter if we're working a 40-hour week. If we can do that in a 20-hour week and do that in a more simplistic way, we should do that. Always maintain, hey, we're working on really complex things here. If there is a more simple way to do it, we should do it more simply. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have, my boss has said, hey, I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I give him a list of about 25 different things that it's going to take for him to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And he goes, oh, well, I was thinking about putting it on this other screen, and then we don't need to do those 25 different things. We can just do 5 of them. And I go, oh, you're the user. You've already envisioned how this is going to take place. You already know the best place for it to go. Because of that, that is more simplistic, and that is minimizing the amount of work that I need to do. So we don't want to be, we don't want to get complex for the sake of having more work to do. Simple is almost always better. 2 more to go here, and then I will let you guys go on break. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. This isn't always possible in a corporate structure, but basically what they're saying here is that when we have driven users, they are going to go find the best developers and the best DevOps people and the best people it takes to come together as a team to pull something off. You guys have heard me say this a gazillion times. Software development usually happens in teams. When you let those teams self-organize and kind of seek each other out, it will become much easier to deliver on your product, because very rarely do you get a full stack project that is built by one developer in a vacuum. Normally you have DevOps and database and quality assurance and the users themselves. Let those people kind of coordinate. Don't put them in a corner and say, hey, my developer is my most expensive paid employee at the company. You're not allowed to talk to them. Let that developer seek out people, ask those questions. And finally, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. What this is saying, don't wait until the yearly performance review in order to say something is going wrong here. We do sprint planning every 2 weeks because we take every one of these 12 principles and incorporate them into our day-to-day work. Every 2 weeks, we don't sit down and start with what are we working on in the next 2 weeks. We sit down and say, what did we get done in the past 2 weeks? What popped up that we didn't have on our radar that we should have? What got pushed off because of that? We do what is called a retrospective, right? Looking back at the past 2 weeks and saying, what didn't we do well? Because that's an important thing of what needs to change. But also, more importantly, what did we do well? What was super effective? How can we make sure that we are keeping that effectiveness and that efficiency and bring that into the next 2 weeks? What didn't get said that needs to get said? That's important, as is what we call a post-mortem, which is super dark. But when shit goes wrong, why did it go wrong? Now that that problem is dead and gone, we need to go back and we need to look at it and say, what made the server go down? What let us push that line of code out that crashed the server? What made that user come to us super annoyed because they lost their data? Any big problem, look back on that. Don't just wipe the sweat off your brow and go, whoa, glad that's over. Look back at that and realize, hey, what caused that inefficiency? How do we make sure that that inefficiency doesn't happen again? I'm going to give you guys one example of this, and then I will let you go on break. If I can find my stop share button, which is always a challenge. Okay, I'll find that during break. An example for you guys is I don't watch a ton of TV. And my parents came up and my dad wanted to watch the Eagles game yesterday. I promise I will not bore you with sports, but I had to sign into the CBS app. And CBS has invested hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into their streaming architecture because streaming video is really hard. You're streaming 1920 by 1080. You're streaming 2 million pixels worth of data where all 2 million of those pixels could have some hex code involved with them, right? So you're talking about megabytes of data that turn into gigabytes for a 3-hour football game. And those that 3 hours is being multiplied by at least 1 million different people watching the stream all around the country. Obviously a huge deal. So they have to solve for that. They also have to solve for user authentication. User authentication needs to go through your cable provider or through a streaming service that you pay for directly. There are, 25 different cable providers probably around the country. They had invested a ton of money into that. And what broke on Saturday or on Sunday for one of their most streamed events? Not their user authentication, not the millions of dollars in streaming infrastructure. Their parental controls server went down. Their parental control server just needed to respond and say, yeah, this isn't any explicit content. This isn't, rated. This is football. Everyone can watch this football. Well, because their server went down, their authentication said, well, we didn't get a response from the server, so we don't know if you're allowed to watch this or not, so we're just not going to let you watch it. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So identify your weakest link, and when that happens at regular intervals, go back through and say, what could we do more efficiently there? Because I can bet you someone at CBS on Sunday opened up their laptop, fixed that parental control server or removed that as a requirement, and now 1 million different people around the country are able to watch their beloved football. So go back through, identify where you're not being efficient, identify that it is work smarter, not harder, and figure out how to make that integrate into your team. Okay, I have talked your guys' ears off. I really do not. Oh, here's the stop share. Sorry, it was on my third monitor. Anyone have any questions before we go on break? These make sense to you? Do you guys see how you can take these principles and the entire manifesto and apply it to so many different jobs in engineering?
We actually apply this at our job too. Literally
A
every day.
lot of companies will come out and say that they use Agile. They will say that they use a Kanban board with to-do, doing, done. They will say they use something called sprint planning, which is a meeting every week or every 2 weeks or every month, where they meet and figure out what they're doing for the next couple weeks. The reason why they do it that frequently is when requirements change. You don't want to plan out for an entire 3 months or an entire year because things are going to pop up. And that's why you want to only plan out for a couple weeks at a time. I am tempted, in my copious amounts of free time, sarcasm there, I would love to write a blog post about when business relationships go wrong, whether it's freelance, whether it's working as an employee. Oftentimes it's because one or more of the 12 principles of Agile broke down. Agile isn't necessarily specifically used for applying it to projects and applying it to business relationships, but when shit hits the fan, chances are one of the reasons that happened was because a core principle of the Agile manifesto broke down. So even though you may not be working in a Agile environment, even though you may graduate from this cohort and not go into project management or not be a developer, chances are you can take something that you've learned from this cohort and apply it to whatever new position you are taking. Go back through, reread that Agile manifesto. Remember when shit goes wrong and you don't know why it hit the fan, but it definitely did. Go back, reread this Agile manifesto. hopefully that is a grain of wisdom that I can implant that you may need to reference down the road. Obviously, I love this so much that I got a poster. I bought a poster and got it printed and hung it on my wall because I think the principles of Agile are very, very important.
Mhm.
Okay, we are way over on break. I'm sorry about that. Take a break. Go. I will see you back at 7:45. We're going to do our intro to Node. The good news is that we are, because it is a brand new topic, we're going to go a little bit slower than usual. I'm not going to be at my Roadrunner pace. We're going to get everything set up. We're going to build our first API call, and then we will call it a night.
Cool. Max,
Thank you, guys.
before we go,
Yes.
I wanted to mention I had something pop up and tell me that my free trial was almost like going to be done in 9 days. I think it might have been
Beekeeper.
Beekeeper. Yeah.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I believe it will keep letting you use the trial once it expires, but everyone is on the same trial.
Mhm.
So you're not alone there. When it expires for you, it will expire for everyone. And we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. There is a community edition that I know is free. I just don't know if when the trial ends, if it will automatically switch us over to that one, or if we have to install the uninstall that one and install the community one. But
Okay.
we've got 9 days until that becomes a problem.
Oh, that's plenty of time. Thanks, Max.
Thanks for bringing that up. I'll see you after break.
Okay.
So, go
Let's
ahead,
see
Jennifer.
how it applies to so many things.
Yes. Latonia had a question that I wanted to read aloud and share with the class. She said, regarding the first principle, is that the same as the map approach? The goal is to build a car, but not build it incrementally. I'm sorry, but to build it incrementally, i.e. start with a skateboard, or is it wholly different? Agile would say the first principle is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So Agile would say, how can we get them a car that that instead of it having GPS and being super fuel efficient and having windows and having everything, how can we get them the first version of the car that they can go take out in the parking lot and make sure this is what they want? You don't necessarily want to do a bait and switch. That's kind of more MVP. Hey, do you really need a car, or do you just need a skateboard or a bike? That's kind of more of an MVP principle. What Agile would say is, hey, it's going to take, take the Tesla approach, right? It's going to take us 10 years to be able to mass produce these cars. Where can we get started to make our customers happy? We can sell a luxury sports car that costs $200,000 to a couple thousand customers, and that's going to let us learn how to make a car. That's going to make our factory get started. That's going to make us get relationships with part dealers. Okay, now that we've done that super high-end car, how can we make a car that's still luxury that most people can't afford, but we can take those lessons and apply them? That Agile way is saying, can we deliver on a small part of this and say, hey, maybe, the airbags aren't in here and maybe we don't have all the windows working, but our customer could go try this out. That's a little bit easier to do with a software product than a hardware product. Obviously, you're not going to be delivering cars without airbags in them. But for software products, you can say, hey, think about your capstones, right? I've got all these different pages and I've got to get search working and I've got to get the database working. And can we take that Agile methodology and scope it down and say, you know what? I'm going to focus just on my home screen. And when my home screen is done, I'm going to show it with friends and family and say, hey, do you have any feedback on this? Because they're going to have feedback on the homepage that you may go, oh, I didn't even think of that. I don't even want to focus on this other page. Maybe I want to focus on the input that they're giving me, right? And so that's the Agile methodology of, can I go get that feedback and implement that feedback as quickly as possible, as opposed to waiting until the end where I may have invested a ton of time on a feature that is not important. Oh, that typo makes more sense now. Thank you. MVP, a minimum viable product, is certainly agile friendly. MVP is about, yes, how can we ship things frequently and often? What is the minimum amount that we can do? But oftentimes MVP will take several sprint iterations in order to get to MVP. But the basic idea there is, yes, what are the core features that we can get out as soon as possible to the customer? Yes. Okay. I believe we are good to jump into code unless any questions popped up over the break. Okay. So tonight we are going to make our first API server. You guys excited? Yay, full stack. We won't be implementing the database quite yet. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. We're going to put all of the SQL knowledge that we've learned on hold. Keep in mind that the homework for this week is related to the ERDs that we learned on Thursday. I will be personally reviewing those and almost all the homeworks going forward to get you feedback on them. It's very hard to get an ERD right on the first try. There will always be more pieces of information that pop up. But the reason why I will give you feedback on your ERDs is so that when you get into your capstone, when you start creating your tables, you've got it structured in a way that's going to not only work for your project, but also work in your code and make sure that you can implement all of that. With all of that said, we're going to start in everyone's favorite place to start, the terminal. So I am going to pop open my terminal. I'm going to do a command space. Tonight is definitely a follow along night. So if you guys are up for it, we will be going a little bit slower, just so that everyone can get practice here. So I'm in my terminal, and as always in the terminal, it starts me out in my home folder. I can prove that by doing pwd and seeing that I'm in my hack upstate folder. So I'm going to kind of cheat and go into my code folder that happens to be on my desktop. I'm going to make my week 18 folder. Flying along, 24 weeks total. We're getting close. I'm going to right click and make another folder inside my week 18 folder called day 1. If you guys like this column view, you can always change that. You go up here and then hit as columns, and that's kind of what gives you this view. If you prefer that over the icons, doesn't really matter. I'm going to go back over to my terminal. I'm going to type in CD space. Do not forget the space. Then I'm going to grab my D1 and drag it right into the terminal. After I do that, I'm going to hit enter. And to prove all of that worked, I can hit pwd enter and see that I'm in week 18, day 1. So we're only going to be working on one project here. So I'm not going to make another folder in here, but this is a very important distinction between Create React App and what we're working on tonight. Create React App will make our project folder for us. So if we called it Capstone or Chat or whatever we did, Create React App is going to make a new folder for us. When we start working in the back end, it will not make a new project folder for us. So keep that in mind. Those are the differences between the two. So we are going to be creating our backend in the Node server. Node is what's going to run everything for us in the background. But before we can start using Node, we need to initialize our Node project. So we're going to type in npm init. And we're going to use a little shortcut. We're going to say -y, which is going to use all of the defaults to get a project started. So npm space init space -y. And we're going to hit enter there. And now you will notice we've got a package.json. That package.json is going to be our starting place for our Node app. So I'm going to take my day 1 folder and I'm going to drag that straight into VS Code.
Max, are we supposed to put the whole week 18 in there or just the day one folder?
Just
Into
the day
the-
one folder.
Okay.
From here, now that I'm in does anyone need help? Does everyone have their package.json in their day one folder in VS Code?
No, not yet.
Okay. Archrock.
Can you show your terminals again, please? All right, I just got to catch up on that. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. One NPM.
NPM INIT minus Y
Yep, -y.
dash Y.
Same simple, but we say dash when we're doing terminal commands.
All right, so I have that.
Okay. Now you want to go into Finder, grab your day one folder and drag that into VS Code, or go into VS Code and go file open folder.
Okay.
I don't have JSON in my folder.
Did you make sure your CD worked before you ran your npm init-y?
It worked.
Share your screen, let's take a look.
Well, now I know I'm not in it now. It wrote to user Jennifer package.json.
So your CD didn't work there. You need to do your CD space and make sure you've got the space in there, drag the path in, and then hit enter.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Max, mine says D1 package.json. Is that what I need to have?
What does it say?
I'm in the VS Code. It's
Yep.
like D1 and the drop down, it just says package.json.
That's it. That's what you need.
Okay.
Jennifer, do you need help?
I think I do. CD and then drag my day one.
CD and then the space. You
Mhm.
have to hit space and then you drag your day one in and hit enter.
Yeah.
Then if you run pwd, it should show you your day one folder.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can do your npm space init space -y, and that will generate your package.json.
Huh. There it is. It looks the same as it was before, but obviously didn't work last time.
Okay.
Now it did.
Okay, from here, we're going to create our index, but we're going to call it index.js instead of index.html. Now, there are a couple things we need to get this server working. We actually could build a node server from scratch, but just like we use React as a framework on the front end to make things easier, we're going to use a framework on the back end called Express. So what we're going to do is on either one of these files, we're going to right click and we're going to say open an integrated terminal. Once we've got it open in the integrated terminal, we are going to run a command called npm install, like we've installed other things before, and we are going to install something called Express. So once we install Express, you see there are a bunch of other files over here. One is our node modules. This has everything in it that we need for Express to work. We never want to modify anything ever in the node modules folder. That's a mistake. You also see that there's this package lock.json that got installed. That's all of the details for npm to know what version got installed. We never want to modify our package lock either. And then in our package.json, you can see under this dependencies section, because we installed Express, it is listed as a dependency. That's what's keeping track of what version is installed. So if we send our project to someone else, they know what versions to install on their end. So now that we're in our package.json, we're going to do one more thing. In Node, they had an older system that was called requiring. That was called the common JS way of importing things. You would use a command called module.exports, and you would use our require. However, the entire industry is moving towards using the ES6 module system instead, which is built into JavaScript. However, we need to tell our code, heads up, we want to use the module import system instead. So in order to pull that off, right beneath my line main.js, it doesn't really matter where this goes, but I kind of like it towards the top. We're going to put a line in here that says type, and then we're going to do our quotes, and we're going to say module. Now, keep in mind that this is a JSON file. This is not a JavaScript object. Because it is a JSON file, you need your type in quotes, you use your colon like normal, and then make sure you've got a comma at the end of that line. This is where the syntax is the pickiest, so make sure that you've got that syntax right. From here, we're going to go back to our index.js, make sure your package.json is saved, and now we've got to use Express. So we're going to say import Express from Express.
I'm sorry, Max. I had to restart my thing because it wasn't showing me to be able to npm. I already did the npm install. Where do I go from there?
You go to package.json and you did npm install Express. Okay, then you just add this type module into your package.json. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start a live share for you guys. May be a little rusty from being in SQL land for so long. And then over in, we made index.js as a new file, and we imported Express. So now to get our server working, we're going to say const server equals Express. And this is obviously JavaScript syntax. That shouldn't be too new to you guys, but this is our first server. We're going to be creating probably 20 different servers between now and the end of the cohort. So this syntax will become really, really comfortable for you guys as we work on different projects. Now, what happens is we define our first endpoint. So an endpoint is just a URL that the server can answer to. So what we're going to do is we're going to say server, and the server is going to respond to all these different methods. Get is the default method that we use. What are some other methods that we have used?
Post.
Post, put, delete, all of those. Triggering back to everything from Ryan's module, there are going to be a lot of concepts that you want to rewind about from 10 weeks ago, a little less than 10 weeks ago. These concepts are going to be coming back up. Body, cores, JSON, stringify, parse, all of those things are going to be coming back here. So as you're hearing these terms, keep in mind that everything Ryan has taught you is coming back now, except instead of using an API, we're building our own API so our front end can use it. So we're going to say server.get, and we're going to do our slash. And our slash is just our default, just like we use a slash in our React router, saying that's going to be our homepage. And then we're going to pass it a function. That function is going to be our rec and our res. Rec is short for request. Res is short for response. The request is any request coming into our API server. And what do we do with that request? We're going to respond with whatever information we want to send back. So we're going to res.send hello world. We're going to take our response, and in our response, we're going to send hello world. Now, there's one more piece we need before we can say we have made our first successful API. Node is going to look at this and it's going to say, hey, you've got that server's coming from this thing called Express. When a GET request comes into the homepage, I'm going to send back hello world. But what do we know about servers? Servers need to run on a certain port. So in order to get that port to work, what we're going to do is we need to tell our server to listen. What is it listening for? It's listening for a request from our front end. Where do we want to listen to those requests? We're going to listen to those requests on 3001. The reason I'm going to put it on 3001 is if you have a React server running, it may be on 3000 by default. Now we can really use a large range of numbers here, anything between 1 and it's like 27,000, I want to say, but 3,000 and that range, give or take a couple, is very popular for software development. So is 8,000. Don't ask me why. We've seen Postgres runs on 5432. React by default runs on 3000. The number that we put here doesn't really matter, but we're going to just use 3000 for this example. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go down to my terminal, and now we need to tell my terminal, hey, we want to run this code. Servers are almost always run from the terminal. They're not run by hitting the go live button or starting it elsewise. That's why when we're in React, we need to run our npm start. So I'm down in my terminal. I'm going to type in node, and then I'm going to type in index.js. We need to tell it node is the server that we're going to run. Index.js is the file we want to run that server from. So I hit enter on that, and nothing happens. Well,
question. I think I
yeah.
missed, but where do we get Node as the server to run?
You just type in the word node and then index.js. We've already installed node so that you can just run that as a command. If you don't have your terminal open, you can right click on any of the files over here and open an integrated terminal.
Okay.
So this is kind of weird because I'm like, wait, is it thinking about something? I don't have my command prompt here. I can't enter another command. Node is actually running and waiting for a request. Jordan, I'll come to you in 1 second. In order for us to see if this code is running, we made an API. We set up our response, but we actually haven't made a request to our API yet. In order to do that, all we need to do is go into Chrome and type up in the URL localhost 3001. When we hit enter on that, we should see our hello world. If you do, you have successfully built your first API. Jordan, go ahead.
So when you said, give me a plan, please. So when you said that nothing was supposed to happen, something definitely happened. Mine's a syntax error, like all over the place.
Okay, check your just share screen. I don't. Okay, in package.json. You see how it says that import is causing the error? There's like carrots underneath it. That to me says that it is not expecting that import. The reason why it's doing that is if you switch over to package.json, we have to add what I have on line 6 of my package.json, which is the type : module. So above the scripts between main and scripts, put a new line in there.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. Do that.
We have to add our type in here of module. And the reason why we have to add this in is because we're using the newer import syntax instead of the older require syntax. I'll be
Okay.
covering that later, but basically what we have to do is tell package.json, hey, when node fires up, just be aware that we're using module type imports instead of common JS type imports, which is what it defaults to. So now down here, when we do our node index.js, it doesn't look like it's done anything, but when we come over here and refresh, we can see our hello world.
Awesome. Thank you.
My local host refused to connect. Is it an internet issue on my end?
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
Sure. Look at.
You have a capital E in your import, and you've got curly braces where there should not be curly braces. Go back to your terminal. Because there was an error, you've got to restart node. So try doing your nodes space index.js, enter. Now that's looking better. Refresh, and we're good to go. Exona, and then I'll come to you next, Kalai. These are new concepts, right? I told you guys we're going to be going a little slower today. That's all right. This is all part of learning a new concept.
Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen because I think I did everything right. And then
Yep.
I also have my type module.
Yep.
But
Just
then I have
refresh
the-
that screen. Woo. Well, something ain't right, is it? Let's see.
I don't know if it has to do with my terminal down here or something.
So I'm gonna cover this next.
Oh.
I'll explain that in 1 second. Let me help Kalai first, and then I'll share that with the class.
Actually, I tried looking at the JSON. It's not in my file at all.
Okay, so that's your npm space init-y that you have to run inside the day 1 folder.
That's what I did, Max. So I'm gonna share it. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, so when you request here. Oh, you know what? You did a capital Y instead of a lowercase y, and that's why it's asking you all these questions over here. So to answer all these questions, you can just keep hitting enter, and then it will generate that package.json for you. And so
Oh,
what we need to do is do our npm install express. And that should catch us up. And then in our package.json, we can do our type of module. And then down in here, we can do our node index and go back over to your browser and do 3001, and we're good to go.
thank you.
So yeah, when you do your init-y, just make sure it's a lowercase y, and then that would have worked fine.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else need help? So I'm gonna share my screen again. Now, something that Exona already noticed, whether or not she realized it or not, was in here, what happens if we update our code? We say, hello world, my first API. I go back over to my browser and I refresh and I still have hello world. I'm like, well, that's annoying. Why am I not getting my new stuff? Well, you know what? Maybe I need to tell the server to stop running. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back over to my terminal. I'm going to click down to make sure my cursor is in the terminal, not in my text up here. And I'm going to hit Control C. No, not Command, actual Control C. That's kind of the universal command for stopping the server. And you may already know that from React. So I hit Control C. And to prove that it stopped the server, if I go back over to my browser and hit Command R, it says the site cannot be reached. Okay, that's normal. I stop my server. If I go back over to my terminal and hit the up arrow, it's going to auto-complete the last command that I've already run. I can hit enter on that. And now when I go back over to my browser and hit refresh, I now have my first API. Okay. Cool, but it's going to be really freaking annoying. Every time that I change my backend, I'm going to have to go reboot my server. There's got to be a better way. There is. We just need a little bit of Jamaican. What we're going to do is we're going to, instead of using Node, we're going to use NodeMon. Let's install that. So I'm going to hit Control C because we can't run any command while our server is running. That's a really important thing to note. So I'm going to hit Control C. That stops my server. And then I'm going to npm install NodeMon. NodeMon. All one word. Some of you got the joke at least. I appreciate that.
NodeMon.
We're going to hit enter on that. And that is going to install NodeMon. It should do it pretty quickly. And then all we need to do is run.
You really didn't like me.
Should it be npx NodeMon?
Yes, we're going to do that instead. npx NodeMon is what we're going to run. Remember, X stands for execute. So we've got our npx create React app. We're going to use npx NodeMon to execute that NodeMon command. So now we get something different down here that says starting Node.js. It's got some yellow in there and whatever. Remember, we're using npx space NodeMon enter. Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you. I have a bunch of errors that came up.
Share your screen.
Okay, what'd I do?
You got a little too Jamaican and went for ModeMon instead of NodeMon.
Oh, okay.
So if you just scroll down to the bottom of that, it has you out in a regular command. That's okay, because npx is going to handle the install for us. So just do NodeMon in there, NodeMon.
Every time you say NodeMon, I keep thinking of Hermes from Futurama.
Go ahead and hit enter on that. And if you get this pop-up that says, do you want to install the following packages? You can go ahead and hit Y and enter. And now you've got NodeMon working. So if you go back to your browser, you should be able to refresh and see your hello world. Good to go.
Thank you.
So what NodeMon does for us is it auto reboots the server, which is pretty nice. So if we're in here and we say, hey, we don't actually want to say my first API, we want to say my first rebooted API. As soon as I hit save, watch the terminal down here. You'll see it says restarting due to changes, and then it says starting node index.js. Now, when I go back over to my browser and I hit refresh, it automatically updated that for me. Now, one thing that you guys are going to run into is if I have a syntax in here, syntax error in here. My God, I'm going to hit save and notice what happens down here at the bottom. It says app crashed, waiting for file changes before starting. Well, if I go over to my browser and I refresh, notice like I'm having none of that. You forgot a parenthesis. I'm not running. I'm not responding to anything. So all we need to do is fix our mistake here, and NodeMon will automatically restart the server for us. So when we go back over to the browser and refresh, we get my first rebooted API.
Mine did that without the console log.
That's fine. I was just showing that if you have an error, you need to fix the error and then the server will restart. Okay, so we know about our get. We can also set up our own different endpoints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say server.get, and I'm going to say data. And inside my data, I'm going to have my request and my response. And I'm going to res.send. And instead of sending back a string, I'm going to send back an object. And I'm going to say, hello, world. Now to access that, I can go over to my browser and go to /data and see my hello world. It may look like this, which is okay. But we know something. We know that Postman is a great tool for practicing our API calls. So I'm going to open Postman. And I'm going to go open a new tab in my Postman. Again, to get Postman open, you can just do a command space and type in Postman and hit enter. And I'm going to make a GET request to my HTTP localhost :3001/data. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the send button on that. And now I get my hello world in my body. Make sure your, can I blow this up? I can blow this up. Make sure your URL is localhost 3001/data. And now we can see, hey, I'm getting my hello world because this part of the URL matches our route as part of our GET request.
What would
Anyone
happen?
need? Go ahead, Shiner.
What happened if you went to the browser after putting the get in there as a path? I mean, putting the data in there as a path, and like refresh the browser.
Just shows you the hello world JSON.
Okay, so I know what I did wrong because I'm getting cannot get.
Share your screen.
Okay. I didn't go into Postman yet. I was just seeing what would happen, and yeah, that's what I get.
Yep. So you deleted your default get as opposed to mine where I added a second one.
Oh, okay.
So
Where did
that's okay. But if you go back over to your browser and put /data in the URL,
Before
at the end, the very end,
yeah. Oh, okay.
there's your message.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Jordan.
I am not too familiar with the Beekeeper Studio thing because if you remember, I wasn't there for that portion of it. So what do
We are not touching Beekeeper at all.
Oh, that's what I thought you had open. What's the little one with the spaceman then?
Postman.
Postman. That wasn't a spaceman at all.
I could play Elton John music, not be copyright infringement. I would get a little rock band going on in the background.
Sorry, do you, I hate, Jordan, oh my God.
I don't want to know why you have that within reach of your computer.
Oh my God, that
I'll
was
just make you
funny.
down for Halloween.
Wait, what was it? I missed it.
Jordan just like grabbed a space helmet.
Awesome. I want to wear that.
What did you need, Exona?
If you could just show me what your postman, what it says on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't see.
You should just see hello world down in the bottom here. I typed in
Oh, that.
HTTP localhost 3001/data, and if you hit send, you get your hello and world showing up. And this is
Yeah.
where we're going to call it tonight. So obviously have a lot more to learn about APIs tomorrow. We're going to learn how to get our JSON in. We're going to learn 3 different ways of sending data into our API. We're going to learn about how to make our first call in our React code to our API. And we're going to start building our first full stack application with a basic calculator. But if you've got your hello world showing up in Postman, you are good for the evening. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Artrell, go for it.
Yeah, if you can just go back just momentarily. So lines 5 and 6 on index. I see it's, more of like a string. And then when you went to like 9 and 10, why does that function looks different? It's not stringified, if you will. Could you just go with that just real quick? I'm sorry.
This one?
Yes.
So we're sending back an object as JSON.
Okay.
So just like in our in Postman, we can see that object is coming back. So
Got
we can send anything back that we want. We can send a string. If we wanted to, we could send back a Boolean. We would get true. We can send back a number. We can send back any data type that we want. Okay, apparently we can't send back a number. That's for a different reason though. But you can send back pretty much whatever you would like.
Okay.
We're going to be sending back all kinds of data types. We're going to be sending back arrays with lists of data from the database. We're going to be sending back objects with success messages. We're going to be sending back all different kinds of stuff. Exona.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So mine does not show that on the body.
Share your screen.
So
you have a connection refused, which means your server isn't running. If you go back to your terminal, you see it's got a error message that says missing parenthesis after argument list. That is because you do not have a closing parenthesis on line 11, which is closing the opening parenthesis on line 9. So save that and then go back over to Postman and hit send again. And there you go.
thank you.
No problem. Kalai.
It's the same match, so I'm not seeing in the Postman.
Share screen. Let's take a look. Let's go over to your code. And I don't know, did you get, let me request a remote. And inside this terminal, server express get, all of that looks right. You know what the issue might be? You're running Postman in the web interface instead of like the downloaded application. Let me try it here. And here. Yeah, so the problem is that when you use the web version of Postman,
Okay.
you can't access localhost through here. So what I would recommend is
I think I downloaded it, so I forgot to open that one. I just opened from the browser.
there you
Okay,
go.
so I
That's
can do
it.
it. Yeah, sure.
Cool. Jordan, do you need help?
I do, but I think it's the same thing. I think I have to download it because I was just
Yes.
going to do it. Okay.
Anyone else? I do have to run. I don't know if you can book a one-on-one tomorrow, or if you want to just Slack me the code, I can get you feedback on that.
Sure.
But if not, I can stay after class tomorrow and we can go through it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Max. That's fine. Yeah.
I gotta run. Have a great night, everyone. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good.